Mr. Amit Shah said that it is a refugee law. No, it is not. It is an amendment to your Citizenship Act. Right? It has that in its title itself, Citizenship Amendment Act. It doesn't say the refugee law of the country. And I am always reminded to one quote that Carol Carvalher from Citizen, she made, that if Facebook was a sovereign state, it would be North Korea.
There is, of course, visibly change in politics of the region, and it's translating into something which is extremely communal. What changed in Assam, and how is it becoming a mini model for every other state?
When you ask the politicians, who is this illegal Bangladeshi immigrant, they will give you all sorts of tropes like people speaking Bengali, they look a certain way, they are not Assamese, etc., etc. And for the people who are poor, who are uneducated, who are struggling with floods, sometimes twice or thrice in a year, this is not an easy trail of paper to maintain.
In the garb of simplicity, in the garb of making life easier, how do you think that individual citizens, and especially vulnerable communities, tend to become more marginalized?
So now not only that you are questioned of your identity because you have been flooded or you just don't have a new place to go to, but also the fact that state is always going to look at Muslims as being outsiders.
How did this suspension of right in the case of Bengali Muslim translate into actuality in your experience recently and in recent past?
Freedom to think, it's an ultimate freedom. And without that, we are not really a human society, right? And to think that these tech companies can have so much impact on our freedom to think is, in some ways, very scary.
In Assam, eviction drives in recent months have gone far beyond land disputes. Entire communities, often Bengali origin Muslims, are being uprooted from places they've called home for generations. Many are also climate migrants, already displaced by floods and erosion. Yet, instead of protection, they're branded as infiltrators. This hostility doesn't end on the ground. It spills online, where disinformation and hate speech turn survival itself into suspicion. And as India embraces digital governance in the name of democracy, a deeper question emerges. Will technology widen rights or simply disguise exclusion? To help us unpack these urgent intersections of land, climate, technology, and rights, we spoke with Dr. Ritumbra Manuvie, a human rights defender and professor of law at University of Groningen and co-founder of the London Story Foundation, which confronts hate speech, disinformation, and human rights violations with a focus on digital democracy and climate justice. So welcome to the Nous Podcast, Dr. Ritumbra.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm fine, very fine, now that I'm in India. So, yeah.
That's hopeful to hear.
Yeah, I mean, as a diaspora, I think coming back home, even for a short period of time, it always brightens your heart. So, yeah.
While I was going through your work, it actually spans a lot. It's at the intersection of a lot of things: technology, identity, state, sovereignty, power, capitalism, and how all of that is intertwining in the ways regions, local narratives, local politics, even geopolitics is impacted. And it creates experiences, differences, marginalizations, hierarchies. So even for that matter, the interesting ways of talking about climate and climate taking away people's ownership of things, their belonging. That's something which we'll talk about later, but that struck me because I was recently in Simanchal and then, in Uttarakhand, in the Vangajur region. In Simanchal, there's a lot of floods, like in Assam. Yeah. And one of the interesting things that a local villager told me, that 2 years ago, this river did not used to flow from here, and my farmland was actually here.
Yeah.
And I don't own anything.
Yeah.
And then I realized when I was reading through your, work, it's actually climate injustice.
Yeah.
In when also particularizing particular identities.
Yeah.
Things. Sure. But all of that requires deep empathy, deep research, thinking issues at a very personal level and taking them seriously enough to think about them, work towards them, because you're not just writing. What you're doing is you're advocating your writing to become policy frameworks so that we live in a better world.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So, who's Ritumbra? Where is she from? What is her experience in childhood? Why did she pick up these issues? Tell me about you.
I think sometimes I think some things are just destined to happen. And I have as you said, I have a very diverse set of, research interests, and I've been traversing through these very different interests, which of course we call them twin transitions in the European parlance in European world. But I think one of the things which has led to this diversity of interest is also just I think in some ways a very selfish need to give back to the society, or just to do something because we are in a more privileged position to do something, right? So I think I'm always very self-aware of that privilege that I think a lot of us have, since we are sitting in this studio doing this podcast, right? And how best can we make use of it to make sure, and I always remember this, I read this as a child, and it always stood by me, and just a little bit of this Gandhi's Taoism, which used to be at the forward page of our NCRT books at that time, that remember the face of the poorest person you've seen, and think of how your actions are going to impact that. And I don't want to come across as somebody having a white savior syndrome or something, because that's not really the idea. The drive is because you feel bad about certain things, and you know that in your limited capacity you can do at least something, and doing that something is better than living with the regret of not doing it. So that's one of the core.
Well, what is your background? Why did you come to adopt this philosophy?
So I have to say, my father, he passed away last year, but he was quite a social democratic person and very fiercely feminist in his outlook. Also a lawyer. So part of me is actually inspired by him. And his fight for social justice, he wasn't a very popular lawyer or, very affluent lawyer, but he always stood for social justice. And there were instances in our lives where he has, which I have seen as a child growing up, where he has gone out of his way to protect a woman from being battered, or, another member of a minority community from a police charge or things like that. So he was, in some ways, we used to, for most part of my childhood, I grew up in Sector 19, Faridabad, which is very close to one of the Muslim areas, Babanagar. And our house was in some ways a safe place. If anything happens. And this was also the case when during 1984 Hindu-Sikh riots, when I was just a little baby. I was born in that year. So I have grown up with the stories of how some of the Sikh community families living in our region actually dropped their kids, newborn infants, to my father's care. My parents, of course, and we were also just little infants then. So, the mothers and the parents basically took care of those infants while their families tried to find safety. And thankfully, all of them were returned to take their kids away. But all these little things that I've heard along the way from my family, I've seen along the way happening in my household. That is perhaps one of the reasons for the things I do.
If it would be right to say, because Faridabad is in the NCR region. You're a very Delhi. You know.
I won't call myself a Delhiite at all. No, I mean I know Delhi, but not so well. But you go ahead. You wanted to ask me something, I think.
You were telling me that you lived in Sarita Vihar also.
Yes.
So what is your education then? How did you?
Yeah, so there was just a very brief part of my life when we lived here in Sarita Vihar. I think I was between 8 to 10 years of age. I think it was actually a very nice time of life in some ways. And we lived just overlooking the Mathura Road, Pocket Bay of Sarita Vihar. I mean, as a child, then it was more, being navigated by parents, both of them being lawyers and building their life and legal profession. And Papa wanted to practice in Supreme Court, so that's one of the reasons we moved there. One exciting event that happened during that time was actually my father and his partner, Dr. Surat Singh, filing a case against Prime Minister Narasimha Rao on the charges of corruption, which was thrown away by the courts. But we still always had that file in the house. And when I started studying law, that was also a draft I read as a part of just, a casual exercise of reading legal drafts. Not because my father insisted, but just out of curiosity, what did he say there?
How did you argue? How did he argue?
It was interesting. It was interesting on many ways because his arguments were more on the idea of justice rather than on the legal premise itself. Because he's a prime minister, he has immunity. So I also had a chance to argue with him on the procedurality of it, which I thought was absurd. And was rightly thrown out of the court on the procedurality itself. But of course, my father's idea was more grounded in the idea of justice and how the head of the state should be behaving and why this is important, etc., which, gave us a nice dinner discussion.
So you have a law background too. You studied law.
Yes,
where?
Yes. I studied law in the same college as my parents, actually, Delhi University, Campus Law Center. My father was quite bright, so I think he actually had his name on the board, or maybe not, but he was more popular than I was as a student, I have to say that. I was not that bright, but it was more to do with the fact that I also did not find it very challenging studying law at the Delhi University. I found it more challenging when I went to do my master's in law at the Law School Bangalore. And that's where basically I flourished into the idea of being an academic and studying human rights and going into that direction.
So your master's is also in law?
Yes.
And then you went on for PhD?
So yes, then I had a Commonwealth scholarship to do a PhD in law, but while at Edinburgh, I switched gears and I decided to do a PhD in politics. And the reason was that I wanted to study climate, migration, displacement, and the governance of displaced persons, or rather how the state responds to these matters. But given the pedagogical sphere of Edinburgh Law School at that time, it was not really possible to do a field work with them. I wasn't equipped enough for that, so we made a decision to shift to politics instead, which was a much nicer school when it comes to, understanding the methodologies of going to a field, observations, anthropological approaches, etc. So I learned a lot during that phase of my life. In that
because you ultimately ended up founding institution. Which you just said that the name is changing and everything, which will come to later. How did the study of politics, after law, bring that change in you, or was it something which was a hangover from law itself, or did politics or the way in which politics is taught and the movements are taught, did it bring some level of activist in you or something?
Yeah, so there's two things that simultaneously, or rather happened in a close proximity of time. One was that I was asked by my supervisor at Edinburgh if I'm interested in tutoring for public policy. And as a PhD student, I welcomed that opportunity and I said, yeah, great, let me tutor the undergraduate course on public policy. And that course actually ignited something really interesting, and it sort of showed me a way of how the policy agendas are set. Okay. So reading the theories of Lampard, for example, how the institutions work incrementally, and all these ideas of how do you move an institution, I think was important knowledge to have. And then immediately after I finished my PhD, that was in 2018. Well, actually, not almost immediately, but a while after. And in 2019, when this CEA bill was proposed, I was very concerned about millions of Indians who are not going to have documents and who will be left out of system. I know there was obviously this very, and I think this is a very true concern on the identity of the minorities because of the way the bill is written. And at that time, it was just a bill. It was not enacted into law, but we knew that it will get enacted into law. I think that motivated me for the very first time to actually go out and hold a placard outside the Dutch Indian Embassy in The Hague. And I was quite amazed by the amount of people who actually turned up for the same cause. And like you were having Shaheen Bagh protest over here, we tried to have a very mini version of that in The Hague outside of the Indian Embassy. And I think from there on, the momentum sort of built, and the idea then became that, okay, we are here as a diaspora. What can we do to make the European politicians and the European institutions understand what's going on in India? And that is where the previous work, or rather previous knowledge that I acquired while tutoring the public policy course came in handy. And we basically snowballed from there. So the idea of that, how should we talk to a senior leader in a European political party who we have never met before or don't have a connection to, who doesn't even know anything about India? How do we build that connection into an actual action from their side? Will they be willing to ask a question on India or the human rights situation in India? Can we get these people invested enough in India to maybe put forward a resolution on the human rights situation in India? So all these things started, coming together. And luckily enough, I also had very nice comrades in the process. And so it was quite a shared business where we will sit down, throw an idea and say that let's go forward with this brief. And this is the kind of information we are getting from India. Can we do something about it? Can we, convert it into a document which the European publics or other European politics will understand? And what can we do further ahead from there? Because we also know Europe doesn't really have any real power on India. It's all sovereign blocks, but there is a tacit diplomatic power which is at play.
So that's the question I wanted to ask, as a follow-up. What is a diaspora capable of doing? So the question that living, far from the home country or homeland, and because you indicated towards the, diplomacy and international relations. So what should diaspora hope to achieve, and what it can actually achieve?
So this is actually a very good question. And this is something that I really struggle when I meet political parties in India about, because I don't think that they see the diaspora the same way as Mr. Modi's party does. Okay. And how Mr. Modi's party sees the diaspora, it sees it that is capable of bringing in the money for the election. And that's true. The US diaspora, absolutely, they are very successful Indians. Indians are perhaps one of the most successful diaspora around the world. So they are very much capable of funding the elections. They are very much capable of actually writing policies in a way which, which the world will perhaps say, oh, well done, India. This is a good policy document. So, creating that kind of policy documentality itself. The diaspora is very capable of that. And if I tell you what I've heard now since I've been in this space for some time is that all the party agendas of BJP is actually written outside of India.
No interest.
Right. And there is a reason for that, because these people are absorbing, they are knowledge migrants, they're absorbing things from around the world, they see how they want a certain country or vision to look like, and they're good at putting that words into a document.
So they know the homeland enough, but they're also comparatively and relatively observing the world and what is working everywhere.
Yes.
And maybe the similar ways in which people can utilize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And then on top of that, the diaspora, and I think this is something that I wish the earlier political parties in India would have, or rather governing parties in India would have taken more seriously. But this idea of identity and being tied to the homeland, it is a very potent relationship that we have with our home country. There is a vision of the home country. And I mean, if you look at Indian history, a large part of Indian Revolution was also being, in some ways, developed, imagined, and pushed through from people who have studied outside or who were living outside, the Ghadar movement, for example. These were the people who were fueling the revolutionaries inside the country. So I think this is a relationship, or this is this role of the diaspora as being somebody who's not just capable of putting money and words in the policy documents, but also have a drive to do something for the country, is something that BJP understands better than any other party. Yeah. And for that very reason, in the last several years, you might have seen Mr. Modi standing together with diaspora of Suriname origin, diaspora in Ghana, who have migrated outside of India as indenture laborers and do not have any real connection to the country. But he realized the soul connection that they have with the country, right? The drive that they have to do something for the country.
The story of their own origin.
Yes, the story of their origin. And he validates it. And because he validates it, the diaspora gets gravitated towards him. Right? And I think that creates a sort of a lopsided
the idea of an ideal homeland where things cannot happen in the foreign country. We still have a space where it can reflect back home.
There's a sense of belonging there, which is there.
Connecting to that, especially for minorities, why should diasporas care? Because most of the times when I have interacted with diaspora, they feel as if it doesn't affect them. They're not the immediate, they're not immediately affected by whatever politics, whatever hate, or whatever is happening in the home country, and they feel distant. So why do you think diaspora should care?
I think one thing, and I also struggle with this a lot when I talk to the diaspora itself, is this detachment that they have with the minorities in their own homeland, because they have a certain vision of the homeland and they can always go back to that homeland. But in that vision, the minorities are not really a primary factor. But at the same time, we are a minority somewhere, right? As a diaspora, we are actually the minority. And this struggle is for the minority rights, right? And if you imagine that minorities are not safe and you don't care about their safety in your country, tomorrow you're not safe in your safe havens of Europe and US as well, which we have seen in recent times with the rise in right-wing populism in these regions. And nobody is going to care about you either, right? So it's just that kind of an equation that we have, and that's the reason why the diaspora should care for the minority rights, because that is their own right. So, yeah.
In your work, you keep coming back to Assam. So
yes.
Assam also reflects, in terms of regionality, a minority amongst a majority, in a sense. Assam also has its own minority.
Yes.
Assam has also the climate problem. Assam also has the tribal problem. Yes. All of these things, which ultimately culminates into the theory building that you do. So recently you came back from Assam.
Yes.
What brought you there now? And then we'll talk about Assam more in a unpacking form. But what is happening in Assam right now?
So, in the recent visit that I had in Assam with Harsh and Prashant and others, it was actually just a coincidental visit for me, I would say. I was not part of the original delegation. I was mentioned that you're going to Assam, do you want to come along? And I think the rest of the delegation did not realize at that point in time that I have actually written my PhD on Assam.
Okay.
So that was a moment for them also to find out that, oh, you actually wrote a PhD on Assam. And I was like, yes. So I tagged along, and I was actually pretty glad that I went to Assam after so many years, because there were things during my field work, and it was a long field work, on an ethnographic field work, where I stayed with the communities and observing the state system. So it kind of not just showed me that the things that I saw back in 2016, 17 were still happening, but also that it has worsened. And it has worsened specifically because of the involvement of the big capitalist corporates coming into the picture, plus a very, I would just use the term xenophobic for him, far-right Chief Minister Himanta Biswa. I don't think I can say anything else. I won't use any other adjective for him but that. So I think he's very fascist in his behavior, and in the way how he projects the Muslim minority, especially the Bengali Muslim minority in the region. And this is not something that I've noticed only in this visit. This is something that I've also noticed while doing my digital work on how the politicians talk about certain minorities since the time of COVID, for example. So Himanta Biswa, for example, stood out amongst the politicians who will go out on his Twitter at that point account to congratulate people for recovering from COVID, right? However, this is the catch. He will specify the names of Muslims. He will not do the same for the Hindu community. And if you recall, during the COVID times, there was a massive narrative in India fueled by the politicians that Muslims are spreading or are instrumental in spreading COVID to the country.
Thug jihad.
Thug jihad, Tablighi Jamaat affair that happened. So this massive conspiracy theory is building on the internet. And Himanta Biswa is going and saying, Mr. Abdul Rashid, we congratulate you for recovering from COVID. So he is, in a very subtle and very dangerous way, just feeding into that narrative
that only
constantly.
Muslims are recovering and Hindus are not recovering.
Yes,
in a sense.
And he would not do any such kind of drama for a Hindu person recovering or anything. Just sort of, in a way.
Subtly speaking, people who are viewing, they're saying, oh, only Muslims are recovering. That means that some level of access to something they have, or
rather that it's only the Muslims who have COVID, right? So I would interpret it in a more ominous way because of the way he was putting it out. So, and coming from a state chief minister, this was really something which was very different than many others who have come out more directly attacking. This is a more subtle kind of an attack, right? And this is not something that you would understand just by looking at a tweet and saying that, okay, yes, so what, the chief minister has congratulated something. But he's feeding into a narrative. He's stereotyping something.
On the face of it's very, the chief minister is benevolent.
Yeah, very banal, very benevolent. But there is this very sinister meaning and sinister face lying behind that benevolence. And unfortunately, we did not get a chance to actually write a Twitter report on him, or rather report on his narrative. I hope we sometimes in future we get a chance to write that. But yeah, so that and there were so many things that I think we can talk about in Assam as we go along. So, yeah.
Because you mentioned that you've done your PhD on Assam and it involved some ethnographic work. And you mentioned earlier that there is, of course, visibly change in politics of the
Yes.
region.
Yes.
And it's translating into something which is extremely communal. And it's also leading to the evictions that you saw. What changed? What changed in Assam, and how is it becoming a mini model for every other state?
So I think there is, I won't say that there is a big change, and the big change is the coming of BJP in power in the state of Assam. I think it's like adding fuel to fire. When it comes to Assam, it's a very, as you mentioned yourself, it's a very nuanced place. Right? There's layers and layers of history, of social conflicts and cohesions and whatnot. It's literally like Brahmaputra, moving through its wherever it wants to move kind of scenario. What is very interesting in Assam was that, and I talk about when I was there during my field work in 2016-17, is that there are large chunks of land mass in Assam which has been eroded. And by our geological surveys itself, we know at least 7% of the total land of Assam has been eroded to the floods.
7%.
Yes. So
It's
now,
huge.
yes. But if we say land has been eroded, it usually just sounds like land, right? It's empty plots of land. But they're never empty. There are villages on them. Regions like Nagaon and Morigaon have had villages after villages being eroded by floods over the years, right? So what is happening to the communities living there? Now, if a flood erosion comes and washes away everything that you own, and it's a poor state, it's not a very rich state, it actually, at certain point in time, it was one of the states with a large amount of, kacha houses that we say, right? Like the bamboo thatched houses. A flood comes, your house gets flooded, it gets even, swept away with the current. You pick up whatever is left from your life and you go to whatever portion of land is not eroded and you erect your new thatched house there, right? And now, since the new thatched houses come up, usually near to a street, a highway or place which has accessibility, a roadway or something, the administration and the political structure of Assam will come and question you that, are you coming from Bangladesh because you are new here, because you have a brand new house here? But how do you survive without a house after a flood? You are supposed to have a new house after a flood, right? That's just the only way you can live. So I think this understanding of how people adapt to living with the floods, how they move with their lives from one char to another char, from one erosion bank to another erosion bank, starting afresh every time, also gets co-opted with this idea of illegal Bangladeshi immigrant, right? But when you ask the state, okay, who is this illegal Bangladeshi immigrant? The state doesn't really have a response. When you ask the politicians, who is this illegal Bangladeshi immigrant? They will give you all sorts of tropes like people speaking Bengali, they look a certain way, they're not Assamese, etc., etc. But can you point them out? Can you point them out with names? Can you point them out? And state did went into that kind of delirium, right? They did try to point them out by...
The NRC.
Not just by NRC. After the 1986, when Tian Session passed the order that if you doubt somebody to be to be a Bangladeshi, then you can just write it in this blank piece of paper, anonymous complaint, give it to the election officer of your region, and he would have to mark that person as D voter into the electoral rolls. It doesn't matter what proof you have, whether this person is anonymous, whether this person is Bangladeshi or not. It doesn't matter if this paper, which I've sent as a complaint, has a stamp or not. It doesn't even matter if it has my name, right? So if I have a rift with you, I can write your name, send it to the election officer, local election officer, anonymously, and he would have to put a D in front of your name.
So you will not count as a voter.
There will be a doubt on your status as a voter. And then it is on to you to prove that you're not doubtful.
Okay, so the burden of proof
Shifts
goes
onto
back
the
to the
voter. Yeah. And now for this voter to procure not just their own election ID, but also of their parents, of the lineage documents. There's two lists, list A and list B, and they have multiple documents. But you need to procure at least one document from either of the lists. And for a state, and for the people who are poor, who are uneducated, who are struggling with floods, sometimes twice or thrice in a year, this is not an easy trail of paper to maintain. Right? And we know this for a fact that the state of Assam itself did not have electoral role at some point in time. You know, it had been much joked about and much written about in by several authors on this. And this burden of proof also means that the administrative process of clearing your name from the D-voter list would perhaps take you 8 to 10 years. And it might also take you 8 to 10,000 rupees, right? Which is your annual income, right? So how do you procure that amount of money, that amount of energy to reinstate yourself in a voter list, especially in a scenario when you're not even concerned about voting? And how the situation unfolded in Assam, I was actually able to get the D-voter list of that year. And it has 137,000 names into it. So I analyzed it on certain factors. And I tried to see geographically where all the D-voters were more. And as my hunch suggested, it was actually in areas which were adjacent to the erosion areas, right? So you have moved from south banks to the north banks in the same vicinity, or from east to west, or from west to east. But these are the areas which have been eroded, and these are the neighboring areas where there are more D-voters. Okay, so you are basically getting flooded, and what I call the state was itself manufacturing foreigners out of floods.
So it's not just the flooding is not just happening with Muslim minority. It's happening with possibly other minorities
as well.
So is there a difference in the ways which the state is dealing with these two different identities, or is it the same?
Yes. Let me also say this. So the D-voter list that I analyzed, it actually showed me that 69% of the people who were put on that list were actually women, which is quite and sort of an obvious understanding, because these are the people who lack documents the most in rural areas, right? So it is, and also the resources to convert themselves into a proper voter, right? Now, since the BJP has come into the power, and rather even little before that, so we can already feel this undercurrent of, communal divide in Assam, and perhaps that is also why BJP came into power. The precarity has become much more intense and intersectional for the Muslim population, right? So now not only that you are questioned of your identity because you have been flooded or you just don't have a new place to go to, but also the fact that state is always going to look at Muslims as being outsiders. Right? So whatever kind of document you provide, there might be some fault into it, or your names might not match because it's written in different from English to Hindi or Hindi to English, or some kind of
common mistakes that could have been done away with an affidavit easily by,
it's not possible to rectify anymore. And even when it is so time consuming that as a poor person, you would rather not go for it.
Because you're living a daily life on a daily wage, and for you be able to survive your family, you have to go to work.
Yes, and this was also very, very strongly coming out in my observations and interviews with the local communities who were living there, flood-affected communities. If you ask them, oh, your name, like jokingly you ask them, oh, your name is there in the D-voting list, and they will say, huh? But this is my mitti, this is my zameen. So they will find it very hilarious that we are even questioning about the voting or NRC or these processes, because for them the sense of belonging is very acutely tied to the little region that they have been raised into, or their families are being raised in, and just that small radius of their life and existence, and anything outside that,
their cosmos is
yes,
very
it's
small.
very shrinked and very limited, and anything outside that, even like going to Guwahati from Nagaon, which is, for us, it won't be a very big difference from Morigaon or Guwahati or Nagaon. For them, it is like going to a foreign land, right? So that sense of belonging is so strongly present in the community and in these people that they don't consider themselves displaced. They think of it that this is the way of life. That's how we have always lived with the river, and that's how we are going to continue living with the river.
That's exactly what I saw in One Gujars in Uttarakhand. So the road is just 500 meters or a kilometer away. It's a highway, and the small forest dwelling clan with 100 odd people living there. So that is their whole world.
Yeah.
So they maybe in a month or two they would just go for getting some groceries for the whole month. But apart from that so-called nomadic life, which we don't even understand, for them that's a norm, and that's how they understand their existence living. So in a way, it also connects with the theme of how state regularizes principles of ownership, principles of land, who can own the land and who can be evicted out.
Yes.
So because it's ultimately, this is not just narrative, outsider, insider, it's becoming policy. At you argued in 86, a piece of paper could land you in doubt, and the burden of proof changes. The law inverses itself. So it's politics of law. It's weaponization of law
that is happening
for some marginality. So how do you see all of this narrative? It actually leads to destruction of lives. In the case of Assam, how is it happening for Bengali Muslims? But we'll also talk about about it for tribals also, but beginning from Bengali Muslims.
Yeah, so in my book on governance of climate migration and the discourse of citizenship, I actually bring this out, and I use the framework of Agamben with this idea of Georgia Grigori Agamben, with the idea of bare life, and he talks about, like, he's in the same genre as Foucault, but a slight difference. He talks about that how the purpose of the state is to reduce a person to a bare life, and it does that by creation of this state of emergency and state of exception. And the state of emergency doesn't need to be like a emergency under Article 360 of the Constitution of India or elsewhere.
Not the Indira Gandhi emergency.
Not the Indira Gandhi emergency, indeed. But I think the 360 is the financial emergency. I don't know if she applied that or something else. But
expand on this idea of emergency and state of exception, because the viewers, it's a niche, understanding.
Yes. So the state of emergency is not something which you just do by announcing an emergency in the state, but you can do it by creation of circumstances where the human life or your population or your citizenship feels that there is an emergency, and this can be a threat of somebody else is coming and invading our lands. So
existing is not normative, it becomes difficult.
Yes, so it's like the emergencies that perhaps kings in the ancient Roman empires would say, oh, this is an emergency, we need to have state power because there is going to be an attack from another kingdom, right? So a similar attitude. And I think this is also very frequently invoked in politics, and we don't study it enough. Because if you look at the politics, not just in India, but anywhere in the world, it's always about otherizing someone and saying this other person is going to take away our land and resources, right? And there's always this constant narrative push towards this otherizing and this creation of state of emergency based on which the state can apply a state of exception, right?
What is the state of exception?
State of exception in this case, for example, was that, okay, everybody in the country who's born at a certain date or time has the right to citizenship, except the people of Assam who need to show that their parents were also born in that period of time.
So in that case, state has a certain way in which it organizes citizenship.
Yes.
So the state of exception would be somebody who does not fit that bill, the rule of the state does not get applied.
The state will enact a little caveat in its general proposition of equality and, normative equality and justice, that yes, everything should be equal except in this case. So that is the state of exception. So now if you look at a very simple example, the internet shutdowns in Jammu and Kashmir, right? So we all have the right to access to internet. Right? The Supreme Court of India has said that it's almost akin to the fundamental right to life because the life cannot happen without it. It's actually also part of your right to conduct business because how do you do this massive fintech if there is no internet in the country, right? Except in the state of Jammu and Kashmir because there is a state of emergency which has been invoked there, not through law, but through narrative. And based on that emergency, well, in Jammu and Kashmir, it's also through law, but also through the narrative, or based on that emergency, the state can apply a state of exception, right? So it suspends your right during that state of exception. In case of Assam, it suspended the citizenship right, the voting right, not just through the process of NRC, but also from much before that, since 1980s, through the application of IMDT, through the application of special measures on citizenship in the state of Assam.
Is this logic of the origin story of India as a modern state, where due to partition, say, one is the Pakistan side, the Bangladesh side.
Yeah.
Because Bangla-speaking people are spread out, not just in Bangladesh, West Bengal,
yes,
and
West
there's
Bengal
a history of mobility.
Yes, of
so
course.
The constitution in the modern selves also ensures mobility within the state, but a past mobility because of the state of, a new state that emerged with Bangla as an identity that is being weaponized as an outsider.
Yes.
And that reduces because then you are an infiltrator.
Yes. So that creation of emergency by saying that there is Bangladeshi infiltrators coming to our state and therefore we need a state of exception, which means that 1971 is the cutoff date for determining the citizenship. Anywhere else in the country? No. Only in the case of Assam. Right? This means that the citizen has to prove that he is a legitimate voter. Anywhere else in the country? No. Only the exception lies in Assam. And in this state of exception, the state is capable of suspending your rights. It is capable of taking away your rights. It is capable of eroding your entire citizenship.
How did this suspension of right in the case of Bengali Muslim translate into actuality in your experience recently and in recent past? Where did this state of exception actually translate into the lived experience of a Bengali Muslim?
So that's actually where the NRC and the CAA becomes really, really important. And that is also one of the motivators of why we started our activism in Europe, because we understood this problem of how the state has itself created an exception in the state of Assam. And we knew that this is now going to be the scenario across the country, right? And now if you read the CAA Act, it allows everyone who's not a Muslim an access to citizenship, which is fine. But why are you not allowing Muslims? Right? Mr. Amit Shah said that it is a refugee law. No, it is not. It is an amendment to your Citizenship Act. Right? It has that in its title itself, Citizenship Amendment Act. It doesn't say the refugee law of the country.
If it were refugee law, it could still have been fine?
I won't say that it would have been. I think it would have been struck down on its validity against the international law, which the Supreme Court at some point held is also the source of law for the country. Because the Refugee Convention, first, India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, but Article 2 of the Refugee Convention very straightforwardly provide the definition of refugee. And the idea is if the country is signatory to it, they should take it as is. Right? And this definition basically says persecution based on your religion, nationality, race, gender, membership of a particular social group.
Again,
right?
Even in that context, you need to have
yes.
equality of...
Yes. So it doesn't specify the religion. It means based on your religion, if you're persecuted, you can enter. But this specification of Hindus entering from Pakistan, X6 entering from this part of the world, etc., that is not for the purpose of the written law. That is the purpose of procedural aspects that a refugee protection officer would need to determine whether this particular religion is being persecuted in the country of origin or not. Right? This is not a purpose to be written in a Citizenship Amendment Act or in a refugee law for that matter.
So you also mentioned, just following your line of argument, so it is going to be something which is going to extend in all of India.
Yes.
In a certain way and logic.
Yes.
The extension of that logic happened in Assam in a way that not just Bengali Muslims, but all Muslims in Assam
are now
into that idea of suspicion.
Yes.
But also all of the Bengali Muslims in India are also in the idea of suspension of infiltration.
Yes.
And recently in Gurugram, Bengali Muslim migrant workers were targeted.
Yes.
A lot of Bengali Muslims live here.
Yeah.
So in a way, that narrative is, subtly seeping into.
Yeah, and with the NRC narrative of, which got created, like the countrywide NRC that Amit Shah proposes to do, I think it's not just the Bengali Muslims, but all the Muslims of the country who are, falling into this state of exception. Right? And especially if you come from a Muslim community where you lack your documentality, where you do not have birth certificates. I was very surprised to actually see this. I don't have a birth certificate, by the way, myself. I come from an educated family. They never thought of registering.
Thank God I have one.
Good for you.
I'm a Muslim. Yeah.
So the only respite that I have was that I was born in a small period of time where India recognized birth by citizenship. But then again, I don't have a birth certificate, so they can question that. But if you are a Muslim and you do not have a birth certificate, and if you are unfortunate enough that you are a poor Muslim, how are you going to fight the documentality procedures of the state which stands against you?
Subtly speaking also, because India is just coming out of, or it still is, in a, I don't know, whether we should use that vocabulary, a third world country in a sense. And in that sense, documentation and or lack of documentation has always been the feature of these kinds of, nation states because of obvious lack of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But also what this translates into is every Muslim who does not have a document is potentially a Bengali Muslim.
Or rather...
Or an infiltrator of...
An infiltrator, a foreigner.
Or a foreigner.
Yeah.
And because Bengali is a easy slur, or it has a narrative.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
In the, of course, again mentioning one Gujar case, so they said that because of the evictions, so the local Bajrang Dal groups are calling us Bengalis.
Yeah, Bengal. But that's also what's happening with the SIR in Bihar recently, right? Now
Yes.
we suddenly see this narrative also in the, we are now monitoring the digital platforms on how the narratives are unfolding during the Bihar election. And we have started to see the caricatures and the meme of Bengali Muslims wanting the vote and Congress party giving them the voting rights, etc., which is exactly the same narrative that played out in Assam.
But Bihar still has a border sharing with Bangladesh. Uttarakhand tribal Gujar population who has never seen Bengalis or Bangladesh or Bengal for that matter, they become part of the narrative of being a potential Bengali.
Yeah.
So in a sense, everybody, because Bengali narrative is an easy narrative. Everybody understands it.
Yeah. And then Bangladesh is on the other side saying that these are not my
These are
people.
not my people.
So what do you do under international law? They are not people of Bangladesh. They are not people of India. Means they are stateless. The country they are found in has the obligation to provide them the citizenship. And then the onus lies on the country of India. But is Amit Shah talking about that? No. So silently swept under the rug. Who cares about the international law? But India is signatory to the Convention Against Statelessness. So that's... If we talk legally on this aspect, then there is more to it that can be unpacked, more more to it through which we can resist this
Please expand.
NRC and CA process. Like, even if we say that, okay, even if you accept that I am a foreigner, right? But there is no other country who's accepting me as their citizenship, as their citizen. So as long as no other country takes me as their citizen, I have the right to claim a citizenship in the country because I'm stateless. However, what the government of India is doing is building campsites, pushing back people. And recently, I think it was also in BBC News, which normally doesn't cover so much happening in India, where Rohingya Muslims were pushed back through a boat and asked to swim back to Myanmar. Okay, now this is the case, a specific case of Rohingya refugee groups. But is this not happening to just people who might be Indians or not, but who are allegedly Bangladeshis, being pushed out into the sea, being pushed out into the Bangladesh territories with, armies yielding rifles from both the sides? So it is absolutely happening. Pushbacks are absolutely happening, and they are absolutely a violation of the international law.
Also, imagining the fact that a family or a person feeling the anxiety of not belonging anywhere while having their memory of being raised in a certain context and living in a certain region, and still nobody being forced not to be accepted. So that's the state of exception. Where every right gets, sabotaged or...
So it's a reduction of a person to a bare life in a way that a government describes it as a homo sacer, which is a figure which is sacred, whom you can't kill, because if you kill, then you are a murderer, and the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita will apply to you. But who can die? Right? So we often talk about the amount of deaths that happen in India in different contexts, in different sociological and political contexts. Also, for example, due to poverty, due to lack of nutrition, etc. So this death that's happening on course of the state, or rather because of the state, is allowed. But this person is not allowed to even commit suicide or anyone else to kill this person, because then the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita will apply onto them, right?
Interesting. So the circumstances can lead to the death. But the death cannot be explicit. It cannot be a murder. But the conditions are made as such.
But the state can create a condition which can actually murder a person. So it's, in a way, like, state can even murder the person through an encounter, right? That is a state-sponsored murder in a direct sense. So there is no law applicable there for the death of this person, because this person never existed in the imagination of the state. And
they're also potentially, if somebody asks, why did you do it? They're also potentially a spy or an infiltrator in a sense of security. So it's homeland security that also will justify it. Beyond that, it's also, which you've argued in your writings, this is also due process. Even people who have showed documents, people who have, showed voter ID cards, still their homes are evicted. So it's not just then narrative, it's not just then state of exceptions being produced, but also people, the judiciary, the bureaucrats, because the power of the state vests in them at that moment in whatever capacity, that forced exception is created despite the fact the conditions are not met. So how do you see that?
So I normally try to disentangle the land rights from the voting rights. I mean, we are not all landed people in this country, right? We still have a right to exist and still have a right to vote.
Yes, of course.
Right? But in terms of evictions and landlessness that's happening, it's happening, as I'll speak from the point of view of Assam, it's happening because of the erosion. And B, it's also happening because the states want you evicted, right? And in both these cases, how the documentality works is that when it is happening because of the erosion. Now, in 2016, Chief Minister at that time, Mr. Tarun Gogoi, he brought in this administrative policy of relief for the erosion affected families. Yeah, and on paper it was a very nice policy because it did promise muavzas and the land rights to people who have faced erosion. But now, as a farmer or a landless person, if you go to the state and say, I have suffered erosion in this area, state knows that yes, there has erosion in this area. But now you are asked to show not just your patta, but also your document that you are indeed a citizen of the country. Right?
So
and that would be your voter ID card, your birth ID card, Aadhaar is to mane nahi hai. So all that documentality process will come into play.
But that also, if I'm a Muslim, I don't want to get into that documentation because it could actually take away my citizenship while I'm asking for land. So I would rather give up the land and continue living.
Yeah, and not just it will take away your citizenship. At this point in time, the state can actually arrest you and put you into a camp and push you across the Bangladesh border without consideration whether you are going to be shot by the Bangladesh border security force on the other side or not.
So state has disincentivized even the potential to claim what is just
the muavza for the erosions, right? So that is how this whole process sort of gets entangled also with the land rights. And now what we saw very recently in Assam when we went there 23rd, 24th August was kind of a similar situation. Ashudubi was one of the villages where part of the team visited. I did not visit Ashudubi because we divided different paths where we were going to and communities we were talking to because it was a short trip. But I had visited Ashudubi in 2016-17. And I had seen the displacements and I have seen the camps which were erected in Bongaigaon. I actually also had a picture of myself in front of that camp, which basically just had makeshift shanties. And the government said that, at that point, the government said that, yes, we have given a campsite to these people here because they suffered flood. Now the narrative has changed. Now the narrative has become that these are foreigners who are here and they're not being evicted, but rather they never had the right to this land. Right? So now it is completely different. And now what I hear is that in Ashudubi, the eviction is much more huge, much more larger. And if I recall from my time in visiting that camp in 2016-17, it was the Bongaigaon camp. There were kids, school-going age, which were not going to school. Now we have a universal education program in the country. Right to education is a universal right, but what is happening to those rights? Those are not being met, not for the parents, not for the next generation either. Right, so it's sort of like a series of unfortunate events that's leading to where we are at, and rather it's not unfortunate events because that makes it sound as if it's destined. It is a creation of these unfortunate events by the state that is leading to this additionality of burden on the populations living there.
In all of these issues, one common theme, because I mentioned earlier, we did a documentary on Yamuna in Delhi, and there are eviction drives, some slum dwelling, somebody is an encroacher. Maybe
that's the favorite narrative of the state.
If they're not infiltrator, they're encroachers.
Yes.
So it's an encroacher would be, within state there is a possibility.
When we landed from the Assam airport, there's boards there, encroachers will meet their fate. Very sternly written slogans about encroachment on the airport, which is really amazing. I was quite surprised at the audacity of the state to put those kind of slogans.
And in a way, it's the the colonial logic.
Yes.
So because I was reading the
or rather the feudal logic.
Feudal logic, yeah. Which with the Britain as a colony, it turned it into very progressive looking, forward looking legalities, which the Indian modern state adapted. Because I was recently reading the Forest Right Act for some reason of the documentary I was doing, and how the natural ways in which the tribal groves or generally speaking, people of the land, because every land has different geography, and because of the way that the nature being the most dominant in the longest period of human history, nature being the most dominant form which guided what economy or what lifestyle you would adopt.
Yes.
So sedentarization is a very recent phenomena in the global history of humanity. So largely speaking, humans have lived
With the nature.
with movement.
Yeah.
And that movement was part of their life.
Yeah.
And what nation or empire or organization of people, what they try to do is to take away resources, which the Britain tried to do through timber, taking away timber produce and things like that. So in all of that logic, apart from the idea of communalization, of course, that creates the justification on the face of it, but that's also land grab.
Yes, absolutely.
Beneath all of that, it's the
idea of the state being the ultimate owner of all the lands that doesn't have a patta. Let's say it like that.
Yes.
Or where you can't exert your right of patta in Indian sense.
And in the modern state, because you rightly said, it's feudal logic.
Yeah.
Because in the modern sense, the feudal lord cannot claim the right to that patta. So the negotiation that is happening
The state itself has become the feudal lord now.
And he's dealing with the state.
Yeah.
Because we understand the logic of, infiltrator, Bengali and everything. But the sixth schedule and the FRA, they have their own journey and struggle.
Yes, absolutely.
And the STs have a relatively favorable political position as compared to Muslims today. But even then, the corporate land grab through, by state institutionalizing it. You've mentioned it about in the case of Godrej or Reliance. Please tell about that. How not just...
In our visit to Assam this time, we also discovered in the region of Karbi Anglong, for example, that was not really part of my doctoral work because it's a different sort of it's the tribal identity which is more prominent there, and I was not studying the tribe so much. But this region, what we hear from here is that almost 55,000 bighas of land.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, is being given to Adani's for a solar project, potentially Reliance for a biogas project, Godrej and Patanjali for palm oils. Okay, so there's 4 major names which were told, which the local population told us are in the play or have the stakes in this eviction drive. Now, when it comes to the FRA and the 6th schedule, with the FRA, there is this, there is the reserved forest, but then there is also administrative loophole through which you can mark the forests differently and change the boundaries somewhat. When it comes to the scheduled tribe areas, the law and the constitution prescribes that you can develop these areas keeping the local population in the loop. And the way the procedures have developed over the period of time is through the Gram Panchayat, right? So the Gram Panchayats in the tribal areas will in some ways be the final sayer of whether we are ready to give our lands for these development projects or not. And this is also happening in Chhattisgarh and Odisha and so many other parts, tribal areas. And with the coming of BJP in the mass way that it has come and the role that RSS has played, and I'm not an expert on RSS, so I am not going to go into details of that. But what we do see and what we do hear from these tribal populations and tribal leaders specifically is the co-option of these Gram Panchayats by the government. Right? So if they have been co-opted into saying that cooperate with us and you will get benefit out of it, they are not going to take the entire community into, consensus or agreement. So there is no consensus as such, is what we hear, right? So by this co-option of the Gram Panchayats, the state is capable of taking away the scheduled tribe land as well and provide equivalent sort of muavza or, some kind of distribution of resources in lieu of the land to the tribal population. And this can be done through providing them jobs, Indira Awas Yojana, or the Prime Minister or Home Yojana. This was already happening actually at the Indira Gandhi time as well. So these scenarios can be utilized for that. Now, one thing that I am rather concerned about is the fact that in the world right now, critical raw materials have become rather critical for our global economy to work. These are like the elements that are used in your mobile phone and chip industry, semiconductors, etc. And in the world, we don't really know where they exist. We have just only recently started to map them. And a large part of them also lie in these regions, which were earlier the scheduled tribe regions. So these are not necessarily your coal khadans, but they might be an
alternative material
an
required
alternate
for another
material
process.
which might be used for some other technology to develop, right? And then, of course, there's also this twin transition of for climate that we need, moving towards the solar plants and biogas, etc., that the government is giving a push to. And for that also you need land resources. But do you need solar power plant in Assam, or can you rather put it in Rajasthan or elsewhere? That's also some interesting questions to ask. And do you need necessarily the lands of the tribals for that, or can you put it on the houses of everyone in Delhi? Make grid standalone grids, solar grids, like how many countries in Europe has done already. So these are very fundamental questions, that how do we want to also transition our energy mix in India, because it is a big question in the whole climate puzzle as well. But does it come on the back of these tribal lands or the tribal people living there, or do we have alternative pathways?
Because being student of economics as my professional degree, so the first thing that came to my mind when you said muavza, so what is a fair compensation?
Okay.
I'm not asking it in a way. It's a very subjective question, in a sense, that fair for Ambani or Adani looking at that land. They may be paying 1,000 crores and they know that they'll be making 100,000 crore.
Yes, indeed.
But the local person does not know. For them, that 1,000 crore, for them it's practically doing nothing to 1,000.
Yes.
But that ownership, one should know the potential of what this land can reach so that they can have a fair negotiation.
Yes.
So there's asymmetric information.
And this asymmetric information is not just in the case of Adani and Ambani's coming in this eviction. I think this is there in the entire government system. Yes. Whenever it comes to the land acquisition, if you look at the circle rates and the market rates of any place in this country,
it's
extremely different. So I can get a circle rate, but with the same money, I cannot buy a similar quality of house elsewhere, because the market rate is far more exponentially higher. So
So it's another form of injustice, which
absolutely.
State is. So I then remember the Land Acquisition Act.
Yeah.
So somebody says that, I remember because I wrote a small article when I was in Jamia doing my master's, and the Land Acquisition Act debate started, and somebody said, oh, they're being given 3 times the value of the land. And I said, so the person who's coming there, putting a factory there or whatever, he's going to earn 3,000 times. So how is it that fair? Who decided that 3 times is fair?
Exactly. And because of this person buying a factory there, the near around land prices will also go
They
up.
will increase. So
and the 3 times compensation that this person has gotten is not sufficient to buy the land.
The land, exactly. That's what I argued. That they will not be able to sustain their lifestyle.
Yeah. Not at all. And I think that is really one of the biggest threat. And this is something that we also see a lot happening in the farming sector, where the farmers are so disheartened by the crop produce and by, like the market of how the things are, that they are happy to sell off their lands, right? For the development project, for factories, for whatever. But can you reacquire the same amount of land ever in your life or in your children's life? It's not going to happen. So you are basically pushing the entire population towards poverty, making them landless.
again, everybody talks from their own experience. And I was there, and again mentioning the Uttarakhand region. So the state said that you could resettle people.
Yeah.
They resettled them to forest land only.
Yeah.
And they gave them land for farming.
Yeah.
You cannot farm for commercial purposes.
Yes.
You don't still have the ownership of the land.
Yeah.
You can only farm for your
Aside.
cattle.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, these people, they neither were, added education, skill set. So they became worse off.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
That's extremely sinister in a sense.
Yes,
that it's
very much. And that is also what it like we always have to understand, we cannot, even if we say that India is a welfare state or any country is a welfare state, we always have to understand our rights and our positionality against the state as being very vulnerable, and state being that, giant monster who can really oppress and take away all your rights because the state has the power to do so. So it reminds me of what Charles Tilley say, that war making, state making, it's the same process. State is nothing but just a mafia. So
let's move to climate migration and governance.
Yeah.
So in your work, you've highlighted that climate migration and the social injustice related to that, as you've argued, earlier in the podcast also, that would become one of the greatest menace, in the sense that there is no regulation, there's no understanding of definitions, things like that. Tell me about it.
So I think when I started writing my thesis, which was earlier in 2010s, there was this whole idea of that we need to define who a climate migrant is, because the states are somehow very fascinated by definitions. And there is a purpose for that, because if you define who a citizen is, who a refugee is, it's easier for state to say, okay, I'm going to take care of this person and not others. Right? So it is in now how I see it at the present moment after submitting my thesis, is that creating these definitions is also a tool of exclusion. Right? You have decided a person born in this country to Indian parents are Indian to the exclusion of everyone else. Right?
So that's inherently the process of otherization that you mentioned earlier.
Yes. So any kind of definition, also a definition of refugee, that who is a refugee. Now the Refugee Convention has defined persecution based on certain grounds, right? Only that person is a refugee. So not somebody who's struggling with economic persecution, not somebody who's, is trying to move out of their very precarious life conditions. That's not refuginess, right? Not somebody who's found into another country. So that's not refuginess. That's just internal displacement. So creation of these definitions is just a way of state to exclude the others that it's not going to take care of. And I think that these kind of dialogues need to be a little bit outdated if we want to imagine a welfare society and a welfare democracy across the world, which, I don't know, maybe sounds very utopian, but should be the ideal goal of us as a rational society to move towards. And in that sense, the governance of migration and climate migration within that should not be a question of who is migrating just because of climate change, because that's a really hard question to answer. People don't want to migrate, even when they are having their lands flooded and, moving from one flood to another or from one storm to another. They don't want to leave their birthplaces, right? They have a right to stay as well. So the question is more about that, how do we take care of people who are present in a way which is just and equal, and which is in a way empathetic towards human beings, right? Right respecting for the humankind. So that's how I see it more recently.
It's also one of the most basic problems that humanity as a whole faces. So it's the problem of borders.
Yes.
Should there be? Should there not?
Yeah.
In all of human history, there have been borders. Your home is a border.
So my partner is Dutch. The borders exist less for him than it does for me.
Borders are also selective because of the good visa, your nationality. It's it's selective.
Yeah, very selective.
It's
so
very
the borders
selective.
are only for people you want to confine to an area. It's not. It's not for.
In a world where borders at some level are also necessary, let's say between men and women, between men and men, between children and father. I mean, they're relational categories. So they're not completely, in a sense, you cannot completely take them away also. But then also, how do you see them? In a sense, how free should they be? I mean, it's a question in the middle of it. Should the borders be completely opaque? What the question? What do borders serve?
To me, it serves nothing. I really wish and I imagine of a world which is absolutely borderless of any sort. I imagine of us as humans as being completely borderless in that sense.
I'm just being a devil's advocate
I
here.
know.
So somebody argues that in a certain region close by, some militant group or terrorist group in their own vocabulary is functioning, and it's actually functioning, let's say. And in a borderless world, how do you deal with that situation?
Of the situation of extremism, you mean?
Yes, I mean, of extremism of any sort. These are some of the arguments that people make, and they're very confused.
This obviously brings us to this whole question of anarchy and, the theory that the whole world is an anarchy, but then there's also the theory that the people are irrational human beings. So it is also a way of how you see the society and how you see the world. Right,
but the world is in between. You see all of these categories all the time.
So it is somewhere in between, and I think so. I if you ask me, then I see the world as being a more rational place than being an anarchy. So my reflection of bordered society is basically that the bordered society creates an anarchy because there is where you're tying yourself to only a certain domain or a certain. You have a periphery. But if you are borderless, then there is more rationality. So that's how I see it. But it's perhaps a bit more,
no, for me, it's a very philosophical question. How do you... It's a deeply philosophical in a sense also. It's also the boundary between being a conservative and a liberal.
Yes, exactly.
So the imagination of a conservative is somebody who is put on boundaries to how they will think. And somebody who's a liberal in thought is, no, let's think beyond boundaries. And both of those categories, historically speaking, have led to goodness and badness in certain ways.
I could say this to you, that in recent years, whenever I've pondered onto these questions, I have basically come to a glass wall and I have said to myself, just do your work in present. We will see what happens.
That's right. So one of the other, very important works that you've done is also on hate economies, platform governance, algorithmic propaganda, Muslim rights.
Yes. And very frustrating work, I have to say.
Frustrating why?
Frustrating in the sense because you are consuming so much of hatred by watching these platforms. By monitoring these platforms. So I sometimes I have to really commend also my teammates who spend hours on these hateful videos. But more frustrating because when you give these very hateful videos to the platforms where they are being put, to the policy officers of those platforms, they say, yes, but this is just one video, so as if we are creating some kind of a selective propaganda, which is not the case. And then my question goes to them that even if it is just one murder, it is a murder. So if you have a policy that you do not want to have illegal content on your platform, and an illegal content in your own dictionary means a content which is communal in nature or inciting violence in nature, then by the definition of your own policy, this content should not be there. But often we hit...
The protocol should be universal.
Yes, but often we hit a wall with policy officers, and we get a lot of presentations for some reason, as if showing us a presentation will make us understand that this is not hate speech. I wish I can give them as many presentations as the Meta people have given us. dream.
They're more resourceful.
No, I think they just like making presentations.
It's part of the...
Yeah. So, yes.
So, again, of late when I've often thought about digital spaces, and last time I read your profile a while ago, a few months ago when you were here, and we were not able to talk to you.
Yes.
But what struck me most was the idea of digital governance, because
Yes.
it's something I've often thought about. The idea that because we used to play, video games as youngsters, it's a world of its own.
Yes, it is.
With its own rules,
Yes.
own protocols.
Yes.
It's a constitution in making. Similarly, all of this digital spaces, softwares and everything, they're rules. They're algorithmic rules. Either they can be amplified towards one goal or the other.
Yeah.
And the way the digital spaces have organized themselves and become sovereign spaces, they've led to not the progressive goal that one would intend and would, they're putting on their presentations, let's say that.
Yeah.
How is it that happened, and how has these digital spaces affected minority rights rather than, positively but negatively? What is your work around it?
So it's very interesting that you call these digital platforms as like sovereign spaces. A lot of scholars, including one from Amsterdam, Natalie Heidelberg, she has recently also argued that, Facebook and all these platforms are a sovereign state in itself. And I am always reminded to one quote that Carol Cadwallader from Citizen, the one who investigated the Cambridge Analytica.
Yes, in
Brexit.
2013.
Yes. She made that if Facebook was a sovereign state, it would be North Korea.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think that's actually very true. Because as platforms, because they are holder of not just the software, but also the hardware, right? The entire digital ecosystem, the infrastructure of that digital ecosystem rests in these four major companies, right? All based out of United States. And they are capable of making their own rules. And over the period of time, they have somehow very interestingly and very... I would just say stupidly for the rest of the population, because we were just maybe I can't say we were silent about it, because I know a lot of people fighting about it, but majority of the world has ignored the fact that they have actually lobbied their way into self-regulation. Right? So at some point, for example...
Lobbied their way into self-regulation?
In the sense that instead of state regulating how these platforms should function, they have lobbied their ways into caveats that anything put on the platform is not a responsibility of the platform, but rather the content creator, right? Okay. Those kind of caveats. The platforms can enact its own law of what content is legal and illegal. In most of the world, that is still a reality. It has changed into a bit of a status quo through the Digital Services Act in Europe, which says that illegal content is something that the states define in Europe what an illegal content is, and that can be very diverse. But these platforms have lobbied themselves into sort of to be the arbiters of the truth in some ways, right? So they can tell you when a content is illegal, they can tell you when a content is not legal, they can amplify the content which you may think is illegal, but apparently in their language it is not. And because of all this creation of self-regulation, it has also added to further opacity on the process of it. So not only they are capable of self-regulating, but they are also capable of telling us that we are taking care, so you don't have to worry. And if you are worrying, then your concerns are irrelevant or immaterial, because look, through AI, we took 2 million content down, right? You only gave us 200 hate speech posts. So what we are doing here with the AI is much more larger than this 200 post. But I know each and every 200 post on why I marked it as an illegal content. Do you, as Meta, know what these 2 million content that you have taken down contained? Can you tell me that?
Maybe they're just a homogeneously defined way in which their system accepted
pictures
hate
of breast cancers,
yeah.
right? would be censored by Meta. Because why? Because it shows breasts, right? Is it an actual illegal content? No. It can be a medical content. It can be an awareness campaign. It can be so many other things. But it is homogenized and through an AI filtered out. So what lies in this 2 million content that you have taken down from the platform? How have you impacted my right to free speech in that? How have you impacted my right to impart education or information in that?
Just a black box.
It's a complete black box. Does the Meta officials themselves know what lies in those 2 million content? I can bet you they don't.
That's often been, the point of conversation and dialogue when it comes to large language models.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how they operate in terms of their
and
intricacies.
it was very frustrating at some point, and we have written a paper. We were actually using a large language model to sort of identify how much the large language model can pick up, or rather transformer model can pick up hate speech and negative sentiment in a conversation from far-right Hindutva groups. Okay. And the model performs sufficiently well, but not exactly well, because sufficiently well, because I would say that better than other models, but not so well as a human would. But what was rather striking in this experiment that we did was that we looked at the back of the training data that was used for this model. And what we realized was that often negative statements like, I do not like this government, were marked as negative sentiment. So linguistically, yes, I do not like this government is a negative sentiment. But for a politics or for a political society, if your system is flagging this as a negative sentiment and then eventually taking the content down, it means you're cutting down the democratic discourse. My saying this, that I do not like this government, is my freedom of speech right.
So what the language model is doing is it's reducing the amount of nuance and
Yeah.
categories
Yeah.
that a human perceives in a democratic framework.
Yes.
And linguistically speaking, something which falls into the category of, say, negation.
Yeah.
That is
A
homogeneously
negative
applied.
sentiment. Yeah. It can also be hate speech, me saying that fuck this government. Now, I use a slang word in your podcast. I'm sorry about that. You can blur me out. But because of this slang word, the systems will mark me as a hate speech. Right? And the same thing in the case of genocide. Now, if you look at people talking about Gazan genocide happening in Gaza, they use different textual combinations of, to make the word. Why? Because just the term genocide can be marked down by the platform.
It triggers the automated response.
Yes, and the videos or the audios can be taken down. I have a colleague, Alita Smullers. She is a genocide expert, and she had a beautiful video in her signature which explains why people in Rwanda went on to commit the genocide that they did, right? The Tutsis and the Hutus. And that video was there on YouTube for a long period of time until the genocides of the modern times started to happen. And now YouTube flags down the word genocide, and that video is not available. And it's her lecture, right? It's an explainer of the work, research that she does. So
completely educational,
completely
nuance,
nuanced, academic,
rigorous research.
Yes.
And yet it gets flagged out.
Yet it gets flagged down and taken down by the platforms. So this is basically where we are at when it comes to platforms acting as digital sovereigns in themselves. And this is a very dangerous territory, because what we have seen, and there was actually a paper which was published, I think, way back in 2016 or somewhere, which was a psychological study on Meta, where almost 600,000 participants, which were not willing participants, 600,000 users were shown images. They can be negative image, they can be positive image. Cat videos or videos of a cat getting killed. And it basically, after showing this image, they monitored the activities of people across Facebook at that time. The study was redacted because it did not have an ethical clearance. Obviously, because all the 600,000 participants were not aware that they are part of this
No
study.
consent.
There was no consent. But still, Meta ran with that study, and Meta came to a realization that it can psychologically manipulate people by just showing them cat images. Right? And this is the potent power to have, the power to manipulate, the power to occupy our freedom to think.
Manufacture consent, engineer consent rather
Engineering consent. Yes.
than the Bernays
Yes.
frame.
Right. Like when we are talking about even freedom of speech, right, we are always very careful that every person has a freedom of conscience and the freedom to think. And that is absolute to every person. It's only when you speak something that the application of law can start, where it can be that, okay, if you have said something which is against the law or within a very limited, proportionality limitation that the freedom of speech rights should have, that the speech can get influenced, like that you're told that don't say it. But freedom to think, it's an ultimate freedom. And without that, we are not really a human society, right? And to think that these tech companies can have so much impact on our freedom to think is, in some ways, very scary.
Also, in very recent times, not recent, I mean, in a decade or so, because these super social networks are not that old, they're just 2 decades old. So, in last 5 to 10 years, what the nation states have been able to do is to negotiate
Yes.
with them in
Yes.
a sense of
the power.
yes. So what is allowed, what is subdued, what is shadow banned, what is not shadow banned.
Yeah.
So first it was North Korea in a sense of its absolute dictatorial sovereignty. Now it's also contextual in a sense that it aligns with certain nation states' power lobby and the end goal being corporate profit and corporate control.
I was actually in South Korea just a while ago and happened to visit the DMZ border between North and South Korea. And of course, I've never visited North Korea. I've only heard about North Korea being terrible. I would like to see it for myself.
I get what you're saying. I was just using it metaphorically.
Yeah, in the sense that there has never been a lack of propaganda in the world, right?
Yeah,
we have fought the Russian propaganda, the American propaganda, and now every nation is capable of, in fact, every person is capable of creating a propaganda if the algorithm permits it. And I think we need to look beyond these propagandas now, and that is basically where what is necessary for the information integrity of the society as a whole. That nothing is binary, and we need to accept the plurality of thoughts and beliefs and everything in between, and then how do we manage and go ahead with it as a society is the real challenge that we have in the information space.
So you've also mentioned in your work about India's push for digital governance through Aadhaar-linked welfare systems, NRC data collection, and biometric surveillance.
Yes.
These have also created new layers of vulnerabilities.
Yes, absolutely.
No, just out of the box, if somebody hears about these things, it's digital change, it's new technology, making things easier, digital locker, you just have access to everything. You pay it. In the garb of simplicity, in the garb of making life easier, how do you think that individual citizens and especially vulnerable communities tend to become more marginalized?
Do you have, I have a simple question back to you on that. Do you have digital rights in this country? The response to this, the Supreme Court of India came up with a judgment saying that, the right to privacy is akin to the right to life. And is essential. The government of India enacted the Data Protection Act, in which it basically tokenized the data of everyone, and it basically made everyone a sort of consumable token. Nowhere in the act really stresses or prescribes the data rights or the privacy rights of the citizen, right? All it prescribes is that how your data is to be handled from one industrial conglomerate to another one, like from one tech industry to another tech industry, how it has to be managed or kept. But this is all just monetization of data which is happening. It is not providing a right to you. You cannot go and say to someone that, okay, you have so much information on me. I don't want you to. Basically, you can't even tell a vendor in a food court in India these days that, no, I don't want to give you a phone number. Right?
You have
Why does he need my phone number for my order?
Exactly. Yes.
Right? Why do you need to send me an OTP when I'm standing there giving you my card, giving you my Aadhaar, giving you my PAN card, whatever else that you need? Why do you need to also send me an OTP on my phone? Right? So this kind of grabbing of every bit of my data, every bit of my privacy, and then converting it into monetary tokens, which can be sold outside. Now, if you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi and you hear him carefully on how he talks about Indian economy being a very booming economy because we have so much population here, that means you can collect as much data, and data is currency. Right? There was a while ago, I heard that Indian Railway basically put out a public notice saying that we have a large quantity of data. Do you want to buy it?
Is that
right?
true?
Did you ask consent of the people whose data it was? No, you didn't. So the government is treating data as a currency to be sold to the highest bidder, and it has nothing to do with your privacy rights or your digital rights. And that is where the problem lies, because if you do not have the digital rights, if you do not have the privacy rights, if you do not have any kind of estoppel where you can say to the government that, okay, this is how far you can go invading into my data spaces, you will make ineffectual your right to any kind of thing, essentially, like your right to, be deemed innocent unless charged guilty. Right? Because the state can concord a large amount of data, which is what it is doing in so many cases that we have seen now, and just put you on a guilty pedestal. Right? So, yeah.
Also, in this quest of the government, not just in India, everywhere, to make themselves more absolutely sovereign, they want to disentangle themselves from the digital spaces that emerged from a global north, US, Eurocentric first, and then US-centric, regions.
Yeah.
And in that attempt, of course, China did it first. It created its own digital economy. Everything that we experience digitally here, even if it's technology, they have their own and so they have a better grab of everything internally.
And also every citizen.
Every citizen.
And that's
it's
how
a deep
they
state.
Can also control the deep
control
state.
the deep state. And so, in a way, it was reflective of a closed economic model. So, as we study, it's not open to the only extent that it benefits from it, and then otherwise it's closed. You've argued that India, in its attempt to create these technologies locally, Bhara OS, Digital Locker, and of course also promoting corporates backed by them to become digitally entrepreneurial. So what is it going to lead to in the Indian case?
I think Indian digital society has a bit more fascination with the American model, to be honest. They are very happy with Apple and Microsoft coming in, and very happy to also incentivize it. And this is not just at the government level, but also at the local state levels and business level itself. So if we have to talk about India becoming something like China in terms of being closed off economy, I think it's a very far off dream. First, we are not going to reach there because our government is going to allow a lot of foreign stakeholders to put stakes into it, where our own industry will not flourish. Now, let's imagine our own industry does flourish, despite all odds. The problem will be the same as what we are facing in China, that there is a single narrative, there is a single way of living, there is a single China information, right? Which does not allow dissent, which does not allow plurality of ideas, which does not allow diversity to flourish. And this will happen in India simply because we haven't instituted the rights, which are our very core values very human core values of rights that are essential to thrive in a multipolar, pro-competition, plural digital economy where all the businesses can thrive. So either that, China, or the American model where you have certain big tech companies which are monopolizing it. So it is,
The Adani
these are the two
experience.
trajectories that I think what India will be going at. Either way, depending on, current affairs are a little bit iffy right now.
It's like a local oligarchy
Yeah.
controlling on
So
your behalf.
either the tech oligarchy or just a very closed off system, but nothing which is plural and diverse as how market should be. Right. So, unfortunately.
During COVID, the experience with digitization was also the realization of a digital divide. Not everybody had access to smartphones. So everybody said, okay, now everything would be digital, people have
Yes.
access to. But what it really meant that in a household where per capita smartphone was only one,
Yes.
with 3 or 4 children,
Yes.
the people are competing for who could actually attend a class.
Yes.
In this sense. And
Absolutely.
so it's reflective of the divide which is existing
Already
within
existing.
societies,
Yeah.
replicated in a certain way here.
Yeah.
But it's also deeper in a sense that not just this in the level of class,
Yeah.
gender, caste,
Caste.
all of these experiences of your identities, they get reflective at certain levels, they replicate themselves
Yeah.
in proportion in the digital sphere.
Yes.
And you talk about it thoroughly. Please expand on it.
Not thoroughly yet. I'm hoping to in future to build my research line in this direction. But this is something that I have started to call digital fault lines. And the idea is simple, that our sociological fault lines, which are already existing in the society, are going to be exacerbated by the digital technologies. And the idea should not be to govern a new thing, but rather to govern technology within the domain of the society. So we can't say that, oh, now suddenly we have technology and therefore, platforms should have that kind of rights, or apps should have that kind of, or app companies should have that kind of incentives to make it. You have to see it through the prism of outcomes for the society and value for the society. Right? Because if you don't do that, then you're going to have a very uneven and unequal society which can't sustain itself. And if I have to go by rumors and exaggeration of the MIT study, it's perhaps possible that we might perish to an AI in the coming 10 years, which is really pessimistic, but also somewhat possible, because before even the AI will become, or a digital technology will become so pervasive that it can actually take care of not just itself but also us, it will still be held into hands of few humans, right? And I don't think that they will care so much about billions of poor people living in a country anywhere in the planet if they have to just convert this planet into a lab.
Coming back to this idea of digitization, not just from the sovereign nation state perspective, but who the state chooses to give free hand.
Yes.
In the case of the weaponization of law also,
Yeah.
the weaponization of digital law happens in such a way that a marginalized group gets shut down earlier, even in the case of Gaza or Dalits or tribals or Muslims. But the Hindutva, far right
Has a free hand.
has a free hand.
Yeah.
And you've worked on that.
Yes.
You've faced it, you've articulated, and you've studied it. Tell me about it. A bit, of course, a bit.
So this is very interesting. And that's, of course, lays the heart of our advocacy as well. So when we formed the foundation, the idea was to actually talk about the minorities in India. But you cannot talk about the minorities in India without explaining to the wider world what Hindutva is and how it's impacting not just the minorities within India, but also creating fractions between the Indian minorities outside of India, right? Because before that, if, India and Pakistan diaspora would be quite friendly, let's say, like that, right? But over the years, we have seen that's not the case. Not just that's not the case, the Hindu Indians and the Muslim Indians are less friendly when they're outside of the country. They're also not friendly in the country at the moment, but also outside of the country, which was not the case previously, right? The diaspora used to come together, celebrate together, and was a bit more diverse and accepting of plurality, which is shrinking now. So now we have to explain why this is happening and how it is relevant for a European country or publics or policymaker, and that is basically where our quest for understanding Hindutva began. And we started looking at, because we are sitting outside of the country, so we cannot go to the shakhas and investigate them. So we started investigating the online spaces in which the shakhas and media spaces which have been co-opted by the far-right Hindutva ideology exist. And one of the first studies we did, which I would like to mention here, is on the OP India, which started at some point as, just an alternate sort of a media from a blog post when this new media was coming, and suddenly Narayan Murthy puts a lot of money into it, and Pai puts some money into it. And we were a bit confused because if you look at the image of Narendra Modi and also Pai at that point, like in 2020, they do not come across as necessarily bigoted, right? I mean, over the years, your perspective changed, but at that point in time, in 2019, 20, that was not really the case. Or that was not that was not the prism through which we were looking at them. So we were rather confused of why they put this money into it. And we wanted to raise a question that why are you supporting far-right media, which is pushing so much hatred against Muslims in the online information ecosystem. And to make our claim more solid, we basically scrolled the entire OP India website with a scroller, and we used only one keyword, and that was Muslim. So every article of OP India, from its beginning until 2021, that's when we published this study, which had the word Muslim in it, we scraped that article and we analyzed it through computational methods, and we looked at the negative sentiment. Now, I'm fully aware that I just said a while ago that the negative sentiment is just about a linguistic. Yeah. But in writing your opinion pieces and linguistically framing a minority in a way that shows you're negatively talking about them, that builds context to it, right? That if I'm saying I don't like my government, it's a different thing. If I'm saying I don't like Muslim community, it's a different thing.
Because
there is a nuance to it, right? There's a difference into the negative sentiments here when you're talking about a particular community, right? And we compared it with the term Hindu. And the negative sentiment in the articles with the term Muslim in it was much higher than the negative sentiment with the term Hindu in it. And we evaluated the peaks of this negative sentiment, and it always followed some kind of, communal problems that happen in the country, or a riot situation or a pogrom that happened in the country over the years. And then we started drawing some word clouds just to sort of understand it better. And we saw this very acute binary of Hindu-Muslim. So wherever the term Muslim is present, there are terms like Pakistan, foreigners, outsiders, invaders, etc. When the Hindu term is present, there's terms like victim, etc. So there's like a purpose playing of Hindu being the victim and the Muslim being the invader in the country. And that's how we presented the study. And we said that, would you invest in a company like that? Of course, we never got a response from Mr. Murthy or Mr. Pai onto it. So we publicly tweeted, we publicly tagged them. The study was also picked by certain media houses. But obviously, we never heard back from them. We did hear back from certain companies who basically said that they are going to stop advertising on Op India.
Okay.
Because of the study, right? And we also heard from certain advertising agencies who said that they're going to pull back their ads from OP India. And And we did notice this, that substantially there were no ads. There was a whole week when there were no ads on OP India's website. But suddenly Mr. Yogi Adityanath appeared as the banner, and the state became the sponsor of this far-right ecosystem.
Oh, so the UP state by
Yes.
Yogi, they gave
They
an advertisement
advertised.
on there.
Yes. So in that sense, maybe they were fence sitting before our study came out, but they came out fully exposed after that, and maybe also got pushed towards more right wings of giving it a support. So I don't know whether our study was a good thing or a bad thing ultimately. Yeah. So ultimately, I don't know how to judge that. But in the sense that this, this close proximity that the right-wing media has with the state, it is very palpable, it's very visible, and sometimes we also feel very helpless on how to tackle it. So that's all I can say.
So this was a very nuanced podcast, one of the most nuanced I've done, because it weaves through different important foundational visions or philosophical ideas. One of existence, which leads to identity. One of ownership. One of change, ecological change, which is natural nature. You're dealing with nature. You're dealing with individual identities. You're dealing with communities. You're dealing with governments, sovereignty, digital spaces, climate. All of that coming together to inform how modern identities, in terms of othering and favoring certain communities, they operate in modern nation states, especially in India. And hopefully you will be moving forward in doing this kind of work within different nation states, because generally speaking, there's a rightward shift throughout the world.
Yes.
And the minority-majority relations have taken a
Major
low,
shift,
major fall. And of course, I would love to continue this discussion because of lack of, because this demands another 2-3 hours. But hopefully we'll do another podcast. And I enjoyed this very much. And I would like to, in the future, talk about these nuanced perspectives on a more foundational level. Maybe how are you thinking of the new papers, the new works that you're doing? And on a final note, if you think there is hope, so where is the hope? How do you see solutions happening, especially through advocacy, through action? So on a final note, if you would like to take up that question, how is progress still possible in terms of whether we will be able to take up this, reversing the way the hate has been embedded within the sociology itself in the recent past? How do we hope to change that? And do we have hope?
As you say, that after every night there is a day, right? So I think we can only do our work in the now and the here, and it's a struggle for identity, for ideology, for what we want the world to become, and I think it's a struggle on both sides, in the sense of multiple sides rather, in what each of us want the world to become. And we just play our part into it, and ultimately just leave it to that. And hopefully the world will become a mirror of what we see it, or how we see ourselves, right? And I want to thank you for having me for this podcast. It was really enjoyable talking to you. I also enjoyed this very much, this deep conversation. After being in India for a couple of weeks now, I think it was a nice moment for me also to reflect. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Ritu, for being here. Hopefully we'll see you in the future.